Yes, I love this land. It takes my breath away.
Welcome to Texas 10. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Steve.
And for the last 5 years, we've been touring around Texas. Currently, we've been to 244 of the 254 county seats.
10 more to go.
10 more. And one of the greatest things when we travel around Texas is seeing all the football stadiums. And we've even been to some games on Friday nights. And there's just nothing like Friday night lights in Texas.
There is nothing like Friday Night Lights in Texas. And there is nothing like today's guest to talk about. We're so happy and so honored to have with us David Smoak. Those around Waco and East Texas know him as Smokey. And we'll get into a little bit of his history. Actually, we'll just let him tell us a little bit of his history. I think you graduated from Stephen F.?
Yeah, Stephen F. Austin in 1981, about 5 or 6 months after I was delivering pizzas. I was sending out letters,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and I got a lot of, hey, that's really nice, but, you need to go get experience, but. So I started working at a radio station in New Braunfels, Texas. And the craziest thing, it started flooding one night. You know how the flash floods and all over Texas. And I had to read the AP wire. And I made it sound like it was the Super Bowl. I didn't know. And the news director called me one night. He goes, my God, you probably scared the living, everybody. Well, I used it as a tape. I got a job in Lufkin, Nacogdoches at KTRE Channel 9, where a guy had seen me when I was at Stephen F. Austin, and started working in Lufkin, Nacogdoches, covering one of the oldest rivalries in high school football in Texas, the Lufkin Panthers and Nacogdoches Dragons.
I'd been thinking about great rivalries, and I hadn't put that one in my mind. I think I heard Scott Smith once say that the best job in football was being the head coach at what was then a 4A school, where you're the one school in town.
Yep.
And when those two one schools play each other, it's a pretty big deal.
Well, it's like 20-something miles apart.
Right.
It's one of the, I'm not so sure it's the longest, but it's pretty close to that. And Lufkin's dominated the rivalry. I was there one year when Nacogdoches won for the first time in forever. And Steve McCarty was the head coach, and I remember what that meant to that city, because they were always like the stepchild when it comes to the football season.
Did they tear down the field goal post?
No, they didn't. They didn't. And I don't remember back then. It might have been the old H goalpost.
Right.
Now, of course, they've changed. But I remember, the first game I ever covered, was at Lufkin, and they were playing, I believe, Marshall. And there was a young man, a defensive lineman for Lufkin. His name was T.J. Turner. He ended up signing with the University of Houston, played in the NFL, was a blue chip player. Parade Magazine, which used to have the Parade All-American team and the Parade All-American, he was going to be named the Parade All-American, like the player of all of the entire country.
Wow.
So they contacted the TV station. They said, can you send us some video of his game? Well, fortunately, they didn't have another game other than that one. There was one other game after that. So I got a chance to just basically film him, plus trying to make sure I covered the game. Sent that off to them. But that was my first game. The Parade All-American, T.J. Turner. He's not around anymore, but just an amazing athlete, and went to the University of Houston and played for the Miami Dolphins.
What a great story.
So that's a great way to kick off. And I was thinking in my mind, so if you started in the early 80s doing this, how many Friday nights do you think you've spent in a Friday Night Light setting? I mean, it's got to be in the thousands.
I think since November of 81, because that's when I started doing a radio broadcast in 1990. But I would think, other than maybe 5 or 6 months during that entire 42 or 3 years, there's always been a game.
Right.
Yeah.
That's,
and you were talking about it a little bit earlier. There is nothing like the small town, because the entire communities go.
Yeah.
We were just in Athens, and seeing that football stadium at, the Athens Hornets.
Oh, yeah.
It's a spectacular stadium, and one of my teachers played at Trinity Valley, and he said, I played at Trinity Valley. I said, where'd y'all play? He goes, at the Hornet Stadium, and there wasn't half the people at our games as there were at the high school games on Friday nights.
Trinity Valley used to be Henderson County Community College.
Right.
They played, I believe, at Bruce Field, and it was an old, beat-up school stadium,
Right.
which I think that's where Athens played their games. But yeah, now they have the really beautiful high school field, and you see, it's silly, and I'm not saying that negatively. There's not many that don't have some sort of new, and the turf and the press boxes. There's some that just can't do it yet. J.J. Watt, the former Houston Texans star, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day, I'll never forget. He was drafted by the Texans. I don't know the exact year, and we were fortunate to get him on. I was here, get him on the show for the radio show when I was doing radio here in Waco. We had him on, and he couldn't stop talking about flying into Houston, and he saw all these stadiums. He goes, "What college is that?" It was like Humble ISD.
Right.
Katie had started to explode at the time, and he just could not get over the difference.
Right.
Well, talk a little bit, because you've seen sort of firsthand. You got to know the coaches, I think, and whatnot. As a matter of fact, I think you're in the Coaches Hall of Fame or something.
I'm in the East Texas Coaches Association Hall of Fame, which is kind of that segment of about 130 or 40 schools. That was an honor as a contributor. I've been up for the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame, which is, of course, here in Waco, as a contributor. And that's really where I cut my teeth. That's where what I wanted to do when you're in Tyler, Longview, in that area. There is no really, Stephen F. Austin, and there's a lot of great JUCOs and junior college, but there's some Division IIIs too. But what I wanted the players, the coaches, the fans of all these cities to feel like was that was our college football. And I treated it that way, whether interviewing players or doing features or calling games or whatever it was. But yeah, I got to know a lot of people still to this day. It's just unbelievable history and memories.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about sort of what you see or what you feel that actually translates into the community.
I'm sorry, but there's nothing like when you get into November and teams make the playoffs and the weather starts to get a little crisp, and when you go to a small town, whether it's Athens, which is a Class 4A school, you go into Dangerfield, which is a 3A school, or you go into Groveton, which is a 2A school, and that's over more towards Lufkin, Nacogdoches. But you see the downtown when they still have a square or a downtown, and all the businesses have paint.
The shoe polish. They have painted up their
on
windows.
The windows. Like, go Tigers, go Bulldogs, go Indians, go whatever. And I got kind of goosebumps thinking about it, because I would, every time I'd go cover a team, and there was a time in '84 until I really got into television where that area in the northeast part of Texas, John Tyler, which is now Tyler High, was amazing. Earl Campbell in 1973. They won the state title in 1994. But there was a stretch from '84 to whenever, Dangerfield, Pittsburgh, Jefferson, teams that were unbelievably good. Gladewater, now you have Gilmer, and I would go, if I'd go cover, if I was going to go talk to a coach and 2 or 3 players, watch a little practice or film a little practice, I would always go downtown, either before or afterwards. And I'd try to go hit 2 or 3 of those schools, but I'd always go downtown, the Dairy Queen, where they'd have the sign up, because almost everybody had a Dairy Queen. So that to me brings back like really cool memories, because that's what those towns, that meant everything. And some of them, by a team making a deep run, Dangerfield had a tragedy where someone walked into a church back in, I think, '83 and like shot the place up. And they went on to have the most, in my opinion, still to this day, the most dominant football team of all time, any level, in 1983. And what it did, they had people being laid off at what is Lone Star Steel, which is right next to Dangerfield. So they were struggling economically, and that team gave that town, that city, that area, something to have entering the Christmas holidays and Thanksgiving that could make them proud.
Right.
So you've watched a lot of games. So who are some of your favorite players that you've seen play?
Oh my God! Well,
Well, Earl Campbell, start there.
I didn't cover Earl because he's old. He graduated at John Tyler in '73. I met him when I was going to Tyler Junior College because his wife was going to Tyler Junior College. Oh my! Rodney Thomas at Groveton, who ended up going to Texas A&M and then played in the NFL. I'll tell you, Patrick Mahomes' father, Pat Mahomes, played at Lindale High School. Was probably among the best overall athletes. His son's obviously, we know how amazing he is and could have played Major League Baseball. He was probably the best overall player in all sports. Like he could do anything.
Well, he ended up being an MLB pitcher.
Yeah,
right?
he ended up playing for a long, long time. He almost ended a rubber arm. And I know Pat's had some struggles in life. You know, lately it's been documented about him. But I talked to him about the week before I went down to Tampa. My oldest brother passed away in April. We were having the memorial, and I called him about having a Patrick Mahomes jersey with his name on it sent, and he was fantastic. Bobby Taylor went to Notre Dame. He was at Longview High School, played at Notre Dame, ended up playing a long time with the Philadelphia Eagles and Seattle Seahawks. Those are some of the better players, but like East Texas has Earl Campbell, David Overstreet, Billy Sims. Those a little bit before I started covering them. And I could go on and on and on because, my goodness, I know you don't have that much time, but it's like unbelievable how many great names there were.
It is so disproportionate. I mean, I just started thinking, you think of great running backs, and Sims,
Overstreet, Earl,
and I'm blanking for a moment from Palestine. Peterson.
Oh, Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He was my son's favorite player.
Right.
He was, about the same time. So and I'll never forget the Adrian Peterson story. Edwin Simmons from Hawkins put up huge numbers and went to Texas and really kind of flamed out when he got there. The Adrian Peterson story, the coach at Jacksonville High School was a great friend of mine, Danny Long, was on the staff at Marshall when they won a state championship in 1980, I think it was 88. I called him. I said, hey, who's this kid from Palestine? He goes, best I've ever seen. And then you sometimes hear that. He goes, no, Smokey, I'm telling you, this young man has everything that you'd want in a running back. Size, speed, power, vision, balance, all that stuff. He said he's truly he will play as long as he wants to. And he ended up playing like even another 2 or 3 years and kept adding some yards to his NFL numbers. But and I guess because I had been there so long, I called his coach, it's not Sam Harrell. Oh my, I just went blank. His coach at Palestine, Glenn Tunstall, his coach at Palestine. Sorry about that. Sam Harrell was at Ennis.
Ennis.
I called him. I said, Glenn, I did a radio show, and I said, I'd love to come down and just don't want to get in the way, maybe do an interview with Adrian. He goes, he's pretty shy. He goes, but come on down. So I did it like when they had athletic period, late in the morning. Went down there. I sat in the stadium, in the stands. They had just finished practice. Sat down, and you've heard this story about him. You shake his hand, and it's like the size of that H. And he was a gentle giant. We had a really fun interview. He's even asked me if I could ever find a copy of that. That was the first real interview he ever really did. And so much so that I can still talk to him today.
Wow.
On the day he committed to Oklahoma, where everyone thought A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, they had me there. ESPN was there. They wanted to interview him. I'm not bragging. And Coach Tunstall and Adrian said, no, we want to do his interview first. The day he signed, the same thing. At Super Bowls, on radio rows, just a gentle giant, a powerful, unbelievable player from Palestine.
He was crazy good, and he was inducted in the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, I think 2 years ago.
Yep.
And I heard him say that I think it was Mac was at UT.
Yes.
And had told him, well, you're going to sit the first year, and he was very polite about it, but he thought, that's it. You're not. I'm
not going there.
Yeah, and he was going to go to Oklahoma because at the time they were better. Mac Brown had started to make some inroads because they were getting better. So it ended up where Oklahoma, Texas and OU had that crazy 10 or 15 years where, and they've been doing that forever. The rivalry. Not his first game. But they played Texas every year, as you know, the State Fair in Oklahoma. My son Craig and I are at the game. He's a freshman. He had still not been unleashed. I think he maybe even had just a handful of carries, but he was the backup. And against Texas, they were down inside about their own 10-yard line. He gets the handoff, and races like 50 yards out, like right in front of us. And I mean, it was awe-inspiring, and then the rest is history with what he did.
So you mentioned in that answer your friend that coaches at Jacksonville.
Yes, Danny Long. Yeah.
And so one of my favorite spots, I always go whenever we visit a town. I go and take a picture of the high school football stadium.
And we've been known to
the Tomato Bowl.
Yes,
Tell us about the Tomato Bowl.
Oh my God! It's again, there's like Texas High used to have Grimm Stadium up there. You have the Rock and the. It's just that old personality that my goodness, the stories, if the concrete and the lights could talk. Like if you ever get on a lot of like land and there's these massive trees, oak trees or whatever, and you just wonder if they could ever write a book. And that's the kind of state they've renovated it, but it still has the personality of the Tomato Bowl. What a great name! First of all, they have
there's a marker that talks all about it. Yes,
yeah, no, it's unbelievable, and I don't know all of the names of them, but you guys talked about how you've been all around Texas and you've done all these counties and all that. I'll never forget one time the assistant news director, his name was Jerry Gumbert, who got me into the business, great friend of mine. He one time said, from this point forward, anytime you go to wherever it might be, I want you to go downtown and get a shot of either City Hall or the county courthouse. So I did kind of what, and I mean, it was like an extra 10 or 15 minutes. And they use that for an imaging campaign.
Right.
Because I worked at Channel 7 in Tyler, the ABC affiliate, and so they would use that as the image coming in and out of a break or a promo. And it was I've done kind of like not quite that extensive, but that was always kind of fun too.
And, it's fun also in these small towns to not only, we went to a 6-man game, and I've always wanted to see, and it's a whole different thing. It's like basketball on a football field.
Absolutely.
But, just the opportunity it gives kids, it's just, and like we already said, brings the whole town together. And
well, that's a good point, because you gravitate in these discussions to Adrian Peterson and Earl Campbell and the team that won the state title and whatnot. But you've probably been to a lot of 5-5 versus 5-5 games and whatnot. Nobody's going to college out of it or whatnot. Talk a little bit about what that means to particularly the players and when they're going through high school.
Well, my senior year, I'll start with that, not about me, but my senior year, I was at Randolph High School on Universal City on the Air Force Base, and I'll never forget the last game we played was against Hayes Consolidated, who turned out to be a phenomenal team that year and also into the future. And I'll never forget sitting at my locker. I wasn't going to play college anything. I wanted to play college baseball until I saw a real curveball and like left a puddle underneath me. Like, oh my God, I never saw it, or I did, but I remember sitting at the locker, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of young men, and other sports with young women too, and other sports where your last game.
Right.
You're not going to ever play again.
Right.
And we get so caught up in this day and age because high school football has gotten more and more national coverage. Like, remember I was talking about the Parade magazine? That was pretty much it nationally. Now games are on television. They have rankings. They have all these recruiting services that are like, it's not overkill because people eat it up, and people who are fans of colleges eat it up. But yeah, there's that's it.
Right.
That's the next thing that most everyone that plays their last game, whether you're going to Iredell or you're going to school at Lorena, and what a great job Ray Biles did there recently with their state championship run now, or you're going to La Vega, or the other schools, the Midways, etc., San Antonio Roosevelt, where my dad, you guys were MacArthur.
MacArthur Bramas, yep.
And I could still, but it's over.
Right.
The suddenness of it's over. And when I do a speech, which I don't do a lot of them, but if I do a speech, and I know sometimes kids are like, shut up. You never know, two things. You never know when it's your last play because something could happen. And you don't really know what you're going to miss until you don't have it. Right. And I'm talking about anything in life, but I'm talking about football. But yeah, like I've interviewed, gut-wrenching, like the game in 2002, Tyler Lee, which is now Legacy, was playing the Woodlands, which had Danny Amendola, who went to Tech and played on some of the Tom Brady Super Bowl teams. They went triple overtime and lost on a play at the goal line, a 2-point play. We got Keandre Smith, the running back, was stopped short. And it's just, it's over.
Right.
Now, they went on to go to the semifinals the next year and the championship game and won it all against Spring Westfield in San Antonio. So some of them were able to.
Right.
But it's over. That play.
If you're a senior,
it's
over.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget my high school coach, Coach Mickler, who passed away back in the 90s. But I'll never forget what he said to me. One time I wanted to go back and watch a practice or an off season, and he said, "You're a dead man." And I was like, well, he probably wanted to say that a lot to me. I had a little turd in me. So, but he said, "You're a dead man." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "We don't need you anymore." Now, he wasn't being cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Right.
He had freshmen, sophomores, and juniors to shift into the next level. And they ended up being really, really good the year after I left. But they always had a great history. And it's true. It's the reality of you're gone.
Right.
You may go play basketball, track and field, baseball, whatever. But yeah, that's something we forget about. And that's why it's gut-wrenching when whether you go 5-5, 2-8, or you're 15-1
Right.
and lose the last game. It's a reality. It's like turn the page, next chapter, have fun. And very rarely, if you're not going to probably play college football, you don't think, or anyone's out, very few, there's walk-ons or whatever, but they probably are not going to play ever again.
Well, and the emotions are so raw, not just for the kids on that field, because of course those are, but one of my memories was my senior year, and Mac was good. And when we lost that game, and back then only one team went on, right? And,
Right. There was one team that
we
was from
were
the
a
district.
great team, but we
Yep.
weren't going to go
Who'd
on.
you lose to, like Churchill or?
Well, my sophomore, her freshman year, we lost to Churchill. We were 9-1.
Right.
They won the state championship. We very well may have been the
Right.
second best team in the state, but you
But
didn't play in the playoffs.
Churchill, I think, beat Temple for the state
Yes,
championship.
that was that year. Yeah.
And you're right.
But you're in the stands. I'm a twirler. My best buddy was the drum major, and she is bawling. I'm crying. So, it just anything that can bring everyone together like that. And high school football does that. It's
Anything
such
you
fun.
do, whether it's your business or
Right.
the business that I'm in, you want to have a common goal. You want to have goals and milestones, and you want to reach them. And sometimes you don't. But and imagine, okay, you have the tears because suddenly you've either lost in a championship game or a semifinal game, or in the case of, again, a lot of people don't realize, one team.
Right.
32 teams made the playoffs,
Right.
and then it was 64. Then, of course, now it's 2,000. But and some of those teams that finished fourth are having a chance to make a run. But it's also the tears of if you win,
Right.
of that tears
Right.
of joy, which my daughter, who was in the drill team, the Southern Bells at Lee, they were jumping over the stadium and Alamo going over the walls. They weren't supposed to. Like, oh, my son's doing the interview with the coach. And I'll never forget the quote he said, because we were supposed to wait for Fox Sports Southwest, which is now Bally's or whatever. And they were like, hey, we get the coach first. Craig had just gotten out of high school, maybe a year or two out of high school, walked up to Coach Owens, who knew him, knew the protocol, started doing an interview with Craig, and he said to Craig, all my players are happy. If they're happy, I'm happy. And if that's the coach in him. And then, and that's the way it is. But man, there's a lot of emotions, ups and downs.
Yeah.
So you talked about that coach and several other coaches, and we've talked about how much it means to the community, how much it means to the kids, how much it means to the school. There's generally one guy that bears that responsibility, and that's the head coach. And so that's a very unique position, I think, because the ones I've known, they've been great men, and they care about the development of the kids, but they're also judged on wins and losses.
Right.
And talk a little bit about balancing that and sort of how difficult that is.
I needed someone to tell me that I wasn't very good. I needed somebody to push me. I was a self-starter, self-motivator, but I needed old school. And I mean, heck, I'm 65, so you can understand back then, as you guys kind of know, it was different. Things have changed quite a bit. But yeah, as much as the superintendent, the school board, teachers who are underpaid, all of that, and what they mean to a school district, whether it's an elementary school, kindergarten, the middle school, junior high, and high school, they're the ones that affect the grades and in the academics, etc. But it's the football coach who will get fired if they either don't beat their rival enough or they don't win. And even some that win get fired. A parent gets upset.
Right.
Well, my son, he cussed my son out. And things like that. So imagine that. I mean, I know a friend of mine. He's a great friend of mine, Dennis Alexander. He was at Dangerfield on the greatest single ever, 16-0. They scored 640 points and they allowed 8. 8.
Wow.
13 consecutive shutouts to close out the season. Won the state championship game 42-0 against Sweeney. They gave up 8 points, a touchdown on a Hail Mary at the end of a half, and a snap over the head of the punter for a safety. But he was fired twice. He was fired when he went to Henderson, and it was because he didn't want to support someone who had moved in from out of the state who wanted to start a wrestling club. And that was at the time in Texas, there weren't a lot of them.
No.
There's still not a lot of them.
No, there's not.
You don't have some bigger schools that do that. So he got sideways with the coach, and they found something, whatever it might have been. And I
Well,
remember
Darrell Royal said there are 2 sports in Texas.
Yes.
Football and spring football.
Exactly right. And then again, when he was at another school, Troop High School, because he popped the kid on the helmet, which, again, we could all have our own philosophies on that. I needed Coach Mickler to pop me in the head on a helmet, but I know things have changed. But yeah, it's enormous. How many teachers, when they're hired, do TV stations do or at the school board meeting and interview them
Right.
and have them on as one of the top stories that night on the 6 and 10 News?
It's
How
never
many?
happened for me, and I've taught for many years. So
She should have, but yes.
No, but seriously, how many?
No.
The
No,
superintendent
right.
maybe because it's
Right.
an entire
Right.
district. But even then, okay. But a high school football or a city that has a town that has great basketball. How many newscasts do they lead with? Either the high school football coach has been fired, retired, lead the newscast on a night where they're playing for a state championship, and or because a new coach has been hired.
Right. No, it's
Like in Odessa. When
Permian, holy
or
moly,
in Plano,
a dynasty.
When schools, that's old school.
Right,
Those are
right,
teams that used
right.
to like run the town. Or now, which maybe it's Allen or it's South Lake Carroll or whoever it might be, DeSoto, Duncanville.
Or
I
how
mean,
important is it on the day that they count the number of kids in class? There's a joke about Highland Park that there was a family that they asked to stay home that day so that they could stay 5A
I don't know
or
how many
4A.
people are going to eventually send me some hate mail for this, but there was always the thought that there was like a half a body. Like one of the students was cut in half. It left them one.
So they weren't in the
They
biggest
played
division.
They're really good, and they've played the big boy.
Right.
I got a Highland Park story that will blow you away. But they cut a kid in half so they could be one half a student underneath going into
Right.
6A.
Yes.
And they've been successful at everywhere they've been.
Yes.
So for the uninitiated, what we're talking about is Texas high school football is divided in divisions by the population. And
Yeah,
right
the enrollment
now,
of the school, yeah.
6A is our biggest school. And you can have, like, Allen and some of these schools, who knows how
Allen
many.
has like 7,000.
Right.
Most 6As are going to be between 2,500 and about 4,000.
Right.
Although there's some of the suburban schools are getting to be huge.
Right. And so you don't want to be at the bottom of that division population-wise because you can be at a severe disadvantage. And Highland Park, which is obviously a wealthy enclave in Dallas, just perennially finished just below that mark, and we're always very good in the very next division. The way I always heard it said was that the biggest division was Highland Park plus one student.
Right. Or a half a body. Right. I got to tell you a Highland Park story. I hope you don't mind. If
No,
I take it too
I
long,
love
let
it.
me know. So
No.
back in, I forgot what year it was, but they really, they had won a state championship, but it had been a long time. They were really good. They had the famous game in 76 or 7 against Plano, where they were winning 28-0. Plano scored 29 unanswered points, went on to win the state championship. But Highland Park was always fantastic. Great football. Well, they were going to play in the state championship game against Marshall, which is just east of Longview. Marshall was really good. Rodney Southern was the head coach at the time. He's coached at Belton and a few other places. I think he now might be at Huntsville. But so Marshall wins their semifinal game. Highland Park wins their semifinal game. And it was the first time they were going to have a chance to win a state championship for the first time. And I hope I'm not wrong here, but like in 40 or 50 years. So Highland Park and a lot of schools in Dallas for the longest of times, really up until about the mid-1990s, they were just going to play at Texas Stadium.
Right.
Just with, everyone wanted to play at Texas Stadium. Well, some coaches in East Texas had started to be pretty good. Mike Owens, Alan Wilson, John Outlaw, Pat Collins, among others. They were like, why are we going into their backyard? Even though it was an experience, it was a big deal. Now, of course, it's AT&T Stadium and the new place. So they started to do flips. And it wasn't so much they were going to play games. Now, they started playing playoff games in Tyler, Longview, et cetera, Lufkin. But Marshall did not agree to play at SMU, which is basically connected as an armpit, not an armpit, because that's as a part of an arm of Highland Park. Armpit was a terrible. Or I think at the time, I don't remember what AT&T was, but they were going to play, wanted to play in Dallas. And it's usually, okay, teams would say yes, whether they're from Houston or whatever. Yeah, we're going to do that. Well, Marshall said no. And I'm doing a talk show. The owner of the radio station where I was in Tyler, Paul Gleiser, lived in Park Cities right there in the Highland Park area. And Highland Park fans got mad. They started calling the UIL. They were like, what do you mean?
Activate the lawyers.
I believe it.
Yes. How in the world would you not want to play? And I really wish I could remember. I think it was Texas Stadium at the time or SMU. And Marshall said, why would... we're losing immediately, it's an hour and 45-minute drive, 2-hour drive. So it was a big deal. I think newspapers in the Highland Park, whatever it's called, they wrote columns and people were mad. And I called their football coach. He goes, well, we'd love to play here, but we get it. And I talked to Rodney Southern. So they ended up playing in Tyler, which has got a beautiful old school Rose Stadium. Mm-hmm. And now it's been renovated, but it's got it's in basically a bowl.
It's in a bowl. Mm-hmm.
All around a hill. And they've done a great job with all that. They really do. That's where John Tyler and Legacy, or Tyler High and Legacy, play. So they played at Rose Stadium, and it was we're not going to be able to have everybody go to the game. It's a big stadium. It's not 20,000, but you could probably have 15 or 18 or 20,000. So I did a commentary. And basically, in a way, we do have running water in Tyler. There are paved streets in Tyler. There is electricity that is not a crank. I mean, it was just kind of I was being a smart aleck, but because I'd covered high school state championship games and everywhere you could imagine. In some of the biggest stadiums like Kyle Field or DKR or anywhere else. NRG, used to be the Astrodome before that, and then, of course, Texas Stadium and AT&T. But it was they were petrified. They thought they were driving up into the Ozarks of Arkansas, where people were coming out of
now we're going to get calls from people in the Ozarks. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is my favorite place to play golf. Okay. I'm telling you, 8 courses, greatest place to play golf for me. All right, so, no, but they were that's what they, there is running water. And my owner walked in one and he goes, man, what are you doing? I was like, what are you? He goes, no, I'm getting calls from friends of mine in Highland Park. He goes, David, do you know that a lot of those people can just buy this station and fire you tomorrow? And it was a lot. And here's what Matthew Stafford was the quarterback.
Yep.
And they beat the living out of Marshall 59-0.
Right.
Made them like it. But there's a story about that not politics, the sportsmanship of playing the games.
And I think it's a great story because it just emphasizes sort of the theme of what we're talking about is how important high school football is in Texas. And, football faces a lot of challenges with the concussions and the injuries, and you got to California, not as many kids are as playing and whatnot. But I think it's a forever thing in Texas. I mean, it is just, and I'm glad for it. I mean, my football career ended in 8th grade when Max Shirley made a perfect form tackle of me in a one-on-one tackling drill, and I couldn't breathe for a minute because all the air went out of me.
Yeah.
And I remember laying there. The coach was celebrating the tackle because, as he should have.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was telling everybody that's how it's done. Way to go, Max. Not paying attention to this kid that
Steve,
couldn't
who
breathe.
can't breathe.
And I remember laying on their ground thinking, I'm a pretty good basketball player. And that ended my...
You're pretty tall, so I guess you can play out.
That ended my football career. But I love the game. And I love what is still, as you're right. It's seeping into high school football. It has really hit college football, but the purity,
the innocence of the game,
right?
The innocence of the fan base, the communities, the towns, and whatever, homecoming, all of that. And yeah, there's starting to be a little bit of that because some of the rules with the UIL are changing. You wonder, and I can't imagine if it's ever going to happen, but like in some states now, they're having NIL in high school. Yeah. And I say, oh, that's never going to happen in Texas. Well, there's a couple of things I never thought I'd see in Texas. Right. One is that games would be televised without being on Saturday night because they didn't want to hurt the tickets. Right. Well, all of a sudden the UIL could make money off of that. It's like naming the Big 12 the All-State 12. It sounds kind of like, if they give you $30 million, you're going to name it whatever the business wants you to name it if you need the money, and the Big 12 can use extra money. Yeah, I think it's almost like you're born in the state. And again, there's some people that don't like the football, but it is on Friday night. Now, you wish you could get like 400,000 or like 50 or 80 or 100 drones in the air, the sky, with all the stadiums lit up. And may not even be able to just do but one area, but you see the stadiums lit up on Friday nights, and you know that there's a lot going on, from concessions to ankles being taped. Everybody is so focused and it's very serious, and it's in your blood, and not everybody, but it's pretty much in your blood.
Well, and it's the pageantry.
Right.
Absolutely. It is the entire night. The bands, the cheerleaders, the parents.
They line up. They have the big tunnels now that are like good and lower. They looked about the size of a gym.
And it brings the community together. We, when our kids, we had girls, we didn't have football players, but we had a group of us that we sat together in those stands, and we continued after our kids graduated until we moved. But it brings people together, and there's just nothing like Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, from the brand, the drill team, to the cheerleaders, to even some that have other particular parts of it. They're like Midway High School, which is, I call it the first time I moved to Waco. I went over to see Coach Gamble. We didn't have their games the first year I was here. We got them immediately because I told my owner, I said, we're going to get them. They had just built the new stadium. They played, I think, at Floyd Casey for the year before, but they had just built, and I drove over there and I was like, my God. And I've seen some nice stadiums, but I was like, this is like the University of Midway. I've used that. and it's just like they have their student section is unbelievable, like really good. I mean, can make a difference. I still do games. This will be my 40, I guess, November of 81. So I don't know if it's my 43rd year or whatever. Broadcasting games on the radio since 1990. Now with 365 Sports, also online and an app. But I can't get rid of it. Right. I can't, there's a lot of things I like to do, but I don't think I can.
So even though you've gone on and you've done stuff with college, your heart is still with high school football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have friends in the business who have worked with me or whatever, where they just said I can't do it anymore. And then even guys I work with, and whether it's because of personal life or whatever, I would feel like I've talked to coaches who have retired, and they think they're going to retire, and let's say a lot of them do, because if you're going to retire, don't do the drama. Right. But they're fine until early August, and they hear the whistle at a practice field, or the juices start flowing. Todd Dodge, who's now at Prosper, and he has won everywhere. He had a couple of teams that he didn't win when he was early on, played football at Texas, and he was a coach at North Texas. That didn't go well. But South Lake Carroll, because he didn't do well at I think it was Cameron. He didn't, but he went to South Lake Carroll and had the wide open offense. He won there. He went to Lake Travis. Went to Stephen. I mean, he's Chad Morris with the Stephen. Went to Lake Travis. Won several state championships. He retired. I'll never forget, Midway's job came open at the end of last year, and they were having an opening. They were going to have a search. And I get this call from Todd Dodge. He texts me maybe. He goes, hey, call me when you can about Midway. And I was like, he's been retired for a year or two. I called him. We started talking. He was coming up that weekend. He was going to do kind of look around. And if at the time, and I don't know exactly what the reason was, he was going to be Midway's football coach.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That would've been,
and they got a good one in Joe Gillespie,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, but who was at Stephenville, played with and coached on those teams, Art Browse, and he won his own state championships at Stephenville, was on the TCU team that played for the national title as a defensive coordinator, but he wanted to get back and coach, and he just couldn't. It's in his blood. Like, shoot me up.
Right.
So he was, and there would have been some things that Midway ISD would have had to probably would have stretched him a little bit, but he wanted to get back into it. And then the coach at Prosper, God, I hope I'm saying it right.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's
The
right.
coach at Prosper took the job on staff under Kobe Carthel at SFA. Cody Carthel at SFA took the job. Chris Ross took the job at SFA. That job opened.
He said,
Bam.
okay.
It's a beautiful place.
Right.
It's a great place. It's a 5A, 5 or 6A.
It's exploding, though.
Yes, it
But he
is.
didn't want to have to coach against his son, who's now been the coach at South Lake Carroll. But yeah, I went by. One of our owners lives in Salina, and he opened up a brand new steakhouse. If you don't mind, Forge 1912. It's
Right. I
phenomenal.
saw it online on 365.
Oh my
and
Lord!
man,
I went there with my
mouth
daughter and
watered.
son-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wagyu, all the whole. So we were on our way up last Saturday night to go to it, and of course you go through all Frisco, which is like used to be an ant pile,
Right.
which is now like Manhattan, New York. And then you go through all the others, and there's Prosper, and then there's Salina, Argyle, all. And I was like, my God, it used to be nothing but like wheat field.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It used to be nothing but when I.
Well, and Salina always was
They had a great-
great
Oh,
in
They
there.
were good,
A
even
great
if they were
football
just a
tradition.
small. And
Yeah.
they have one of the things, I was talking earlier about when you get the shoe polish and you paint all the windows. Salina still has that downtown feel,
Yep.
where they probably do that. I've covered them. I've never ever covered a game in Salina. I was there to go to the steakhouse, but that's the kind of downtown that we're
Right.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, just one more thing I want to ask you about, which it sort of goes back to the purity thing, right? I know you're very involved in the awards at the end of the school year, season, or whatnot. Talk a little bit about that and sort of the scholar athlete.
Oh, the thing I do in May.
Right.
Well, back in 1984, I moved from Lufkin, Nacogdoches to Longview. We moved to Longview. And that was the same year the University Interscholastic League, because there was a lot of concerns about student athletes and grades, and were kids going to class, and were they passing their classes? And I'm sure, like you guys did, we didn't need the UIL to tell me that. My dad and mom were the UIL.
Right.
That that was the government. We didn't. There was no give and take.
Right.
And so the UIL passed what was called no pass, no play. And a lot of people didn't like it. Some people thought it was brilliant. And I never thought it was a big deal at the time, but a lot of coaches were so angry about it. And I was like, if your kid's going to class, most teachers, if you pay attention and act like you care, they're not going to hurt you. Just, go to class. So, and I'm not trying to step on your toes as far as that, but it was a big deal. And I remember the backlash. I think Mark White was the governor, and it was like a lot of people got mad. I was like, why would you not want to honor the ones that are doing their thing?
Right.
It's not athlete, it's student athlete.
Right.
So in 1990, I started a program in Tyler, and I came in here in 2010 and started it up the year after I got here, which is honoring 20, it's been 20 from day one, 20 student athletes, 10 boys, 10 girls, who have a 90 or so grade point average or better. Or so means sometimes I think we've raised it to 92 or 93, involved in at least one varsity sport, heavily involved in the community, heavily involved in their school activities, not just UIL sports or whatever, and like the girl and boy next door. And some of them have gone on to the academies, military academies, and some of them have gone on to Stanford or Vanderbilt or Georgetown. And a lot of it, some go to schools around here, whether it's Tarleton or MCC, Baylor, Texas. So every year I send out the week before the Super Bowl, when I go cover the Super Bowl, packaged to about 85 schools in greater Central Texas. Some of them that either may not know we exist based on the coverage area, although what we do now, it's all over the country because it's a podcast. And they have until the end of March to send me back one boy, one girl, 2 students each school. And I get their nominations and I just stack them. I don't look at them, I stack them, and stack them. And there's usually about 85 to 110. And I start to go through them, and there's like 5 or 8 that did not follow directions. They're like 88. I'm sorry, you got to say no sometime. And then we have committee that kind of goes through them. And it's weird because you end up with like 20 of each, and you're like, oh my God, I wish I was a millionaire where I could just do 20 of each. But it always like, it just kind of shuffles. It just kind of a magnet. These end up being your 10 or 12, the 10 or 12, and then you get your 10. And then in May, I contact them the first week in May. And then usually the second or third Wednesday in May, we have a banquet. And we honor them with a check, a plaque, a banquet, a dinner. They can bring some family and friends or whatever. And I've been doing that since 1990.
Well, that's amazing. That's awesome. And I could talk high school football we could have.
I know.
Right? We could go
way
on.
Too much. I know.
But that's okay.
No.
We've loved having you on. This is obviously it's a very important part of Texas culture, and folks that don't understand it, they need to get out Friday night and go to a game.
Yeah, I think if you move in from another state or whatever, I think you would be blown away by what it means as far as the culture of the city. And yeah, there's sometimes you hear stories about where people lose their sight of what really is what's supposed to be going on. But it is like we have about 2 months until the first game at the end of August of this summer. And it just, here we go. Now, don't get me wrong. When it's over in December, when it's over, I take it.
I bet
you do. It's a 17-week grind. You know, you have two practices, scrimmage, 1 or 2, depending on what you've done during the spring, and then you could play as many as 16 games, and and the UIL does an incredible job with it.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe, like us, all that sort of stuff.
Thanks.
And make sure you catch David on Sikkim 365. He has a great podcast. College football, or college sports in general, high school stuff. You've heard exactly how both knowledgeable and passionate he is about that. So that's always an entertaining listen. Love having you in Central Texas. And you guys go to texas10.com. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
And I love this land. It takes my breath away. From the Palo Duro to the Gulf Coast Plain. From the heart of the hill country to the piney wood shade. I love this land. It takes my breath away.